you're waiting, I'll try to let you know. You know, I always hate when I'm in the copy line, they don't acknowledge I'm here. I'll try to acknowledge that your hand is up, and then I'll make sure I get to you. Yeah.
Chair, Steve?
What's that?
You need a chair?
If you've got another tall chair, I'd take it.
I don't know. The guy that I need to ask is finally found.
Let me check.
But I'm good. You don't worry. Don't worry. Yeah.
All right, cool.
I sat down all very much. So questions, yes. Let me think of what else. Was everybody here in the morning in one session, or do we have some people who haven't been involved at all yet today? Okay, so everybody kind of know. Our format in the one that we did was I went through the panel, gave everybody kind of an opening remarks on the topic, anything that was on their mind. So traditional sort of panel style, like here's what I'm thinking on the subject of distribution, or here's what's on my mind, or here's what I think is important, or oh my God, if we want to talk about this, it's a disaster, or whatever that is. They're going to get a chance to spit it out. I'm going to ask that they top line introduce themselves, you know, kind of remind name and what they do before they say, here's what you got to know on distribution. And then we'll hit the first topic, the one that had the most check marks was working with a distributor, trying to get an understanding of what it's like to work with a distributor. And that may beg a ton of questions like, who are the distributors we should be working with? Who are the ones we care about, how that's evolved over time. So why don't I just start with Beth, and then we'll go down. Why don't you introduce yourself, what you do, and what's on your mind in terms of distribution these days.
Okay, my name is Beth Barrett, and I'm the Director of Programming at CIF. And in terms of distribution, we don't distribute films, obviously, we exhibit them. But when I think about distribution, I think about what you do when your film is made. So I think instead of just that word distribution, because we all think, oh, well, then it goes to the movie theaters and then, you know, the DVD comes out. But it's all about what you do after the film is done, the second life of the film. And so for me and for CIF, obviously, we want to be sure that film festivals are a vibrant and crucial part of a distribution plan. And I know that there's some agreement and some disagreement.
Look at me.
Mark will be our default for anything we want to blame me, but we always got to pick somebody. Do you mind?
So I mean, we just want to be sure that that you're considering festivals and what festivals and what kinds of part that might play in what happens when your film's done.
Hi. I'm Mark Lipsky, and it's all my fault. I've been a distributor for quite a few years, and then transitioned more into technology, which has now circled right back into distribution again, lo and behold. So I'm currently working on I'm not allowed to say this here, but I'll say I'm currently working on a solution to all of your distribution woes. But in the meantime, film festivals, you know, are distribution these days for most films. And you know, I'll just say at the outset here that I think there will be options. There'll be really good options in the not too distant future. Currently, though, you know, outside of film festivals, you're screwed. So
I'm right.
We're screwed. No, we're fine.
I might have a follow-up. On that, but Adam.
Yeah, my name is Adam Schooler. I'm the program director here at Northrop Film Forum, and since about 2006, the Film Forum's been involved in distributing films. We definitely don't think you're screwed. And we've kind of created an interesting model to release works that initially it evolved out of some of the production programs that the Film Forum was involved in, specifically the Start to Finish project. A film called Police Speed premiered at Sundance in competition, got some really great reviews and got no theatrical distribution, so we took it upon ourselves to distribute the film theatrically in North America and have some, when you talk to distributors, I think it's some great success. There were about 25 cities in North America that screen the film, and since then the program's really evolved to include not just films from the Pacific Northwest, but also some films internationally. There's been a lot of changes internationally in the way that films have been distributed, and a lot of companies that have distributed more art house. Some of the more challenging art house films have folded in the last 10 to 15 years, and we've really handled trying to take some of those challenging films that have been considered more festival films into a theatrical setting. So that's probably how I ended up on this one.
And then John.
My name is John Sino. I've been a distributor for 15 years, and I released a number of films in theaters. Also produced a couple of films. One of them was a documentary about Iraq, and won many awards, but we could not put it in. No distributor would pick it up, so I ended up distributing it nationally in North America. Released it on DVD, in theaters. Been involved in many projects as far as like just TV sales, but all on a small scale. A small company based in Seattle, my thinking about distribution has been kind of changing recently. Simply because the old model that we had, that we relied on in the 80s and 90s, and the first 5 years of the 2000s, basically, essentially, it's falling apart. I mean, and I think that the sooner we realize that, the better off we are. And that falling apart is in some ways terrible, in some ways good. Because it's terrible because it produced a sustainable income for many filmmakers, and we're all used to this model in terms of producing income, and we know what it produces. First, you kind of do theatrical, and you used to make some money on theatrical. Nowadays, you don't make money on theatrical. You just basically push it up on the DVD sales and down the line. But as time progresses, this thing, kicking the bucket, is going further and further. No, you cannot make money on theatrical. Now, no, you cannot make money on DVD sales because those are going down. Then you have to put it online. Online, basically, distribution is peanuts. I mean, literally, you get checks for like $50, $60, whatever, and then 25 cents, and So you cannot justify spending $200,000 or $1 million or $5 million to make a film that's going to be released, digitally at this point. And we are losing our cathedral. Our cathedral, what I say is like for the church, in religion, cathedral is important. Our cathedral is the movie theater. That's where it sets the agenda. That's where people realize there's a film and that it's a brand. And obviously festivals are a big part of that. Festivals, So the more we kind of lose that edge in terms of like films premiering in theaters, the chain down the line is going, from bad to worse in terms of promotion. And because no matter, the issue is not really distributing films or having access to films. Has been an issue. Every film you want to see was available at some point, if you wanted to see it. The issue is basically knowing what to see, or at least maybe setting the agenda, the diet of what to see. Initially, when the festivals would dwindle some of these entrants, and then distributors would dwindle some more, and we kind of pick and choose some more from these, and then end up more kind of picking and choosing for theatrical down the line. By the time you and I basically go to our video store, we have like maybe 25 films to pick from. You go on Netflix, and there's like thousands of films, and most of them you haven't heard of. So the issue is basically not making the film available, easily accessible. That's not been the issue. The issue is basically knowing what to see and wanting to see what's available. And then there's two issues in distribution that I would like to talk about. The issue of making money and then reaching people. Reaching people have never been easier. Making money is much more difficult. The internet makes reaching people 10 times easier than we ever have. But having these people actually pay to help the film is becoming more and more.
Sure, Mark, just a quick addendum. When I say you guys are screwed, I don't mean stop making movies, because truly it's going to keep getting better and better and better in terms of distribution and finding obviously it's never been easier or less expensive to make a film, but it's been harder to find the audience. I disagree with John somewhat in terms of, yes, the internet is this great communication tool, and it makes it possible for you to touch billions of people, and that was never possible before. But what you lost in theatrical, which John also pointed out, is the opportunity to launch your film in a substantial way, so that people want to see your film, so that people know to look for your film, or search for your film, or stumble on your film somehow. So I think what's coming, as far as I know, is that ability again to launch the way you used to be able to do in theaters, and to do that online. And once that's established, once there is a point of departure online, and it's coming, then we're right back to, oh my God, you know, there are literally billions of people out there that I can touch. So I don't want to say don't make movies. In fact, the opposite. I say make your film no matter what. You know, whether or not you can raise your budget, whether or not you've ever made a movie before, whether or not anyone may ever see it. Theoretically, you're an independent filmmaker. You have to make your movie, and if you're not in that situation where you must do it or you're going to die, then you probably shouldn't be a filmmaker. The challenges are real, and it is transitional. It's going to get better.
Well, I was going to ask actually quickly, because Mark, a few years ago, before he moved to town, he and I had this conversation about a film that he handled, that he distributed. You in a way, already tested some of these waters. I'm trying to remember the name. It was like a family documentary. Well, I'm glad that I
must read after my death.
Right, exactly. Which you already you've
Yes.
tried to pioneer this way of distributing the work via the web before the theaters, and getting the same kind of attention,
Yes.
critical attention for the work. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that. I think that might be a helpful experience to share with people, and,
Sure.
and some of the lessons you learned.
So what I, as a distributor 4 years ago with an independent film company out of New York, which was called Gigantic, most ironically named company on the planet. It was a friend of mine owned this company, had for a decade been building an independent film and music studio. And it was a great idea, and he threw a lot of money at it, and unfortunately I came in at the end of the money that was being thrown. But he had a music recording studio and an indie rock record label, and he had a film production entity, but no film distribution. So he asked me if I'd come in and launch an independent film company, and I said, well, fine. That's the last thing the world needs right now. I think I know how to begin the transition of combining analog and digital in a way that's going to be meaningful and really help filmmakers and make a difference for the audience as well. So he said, fine. So what I did was create something called Gigantic Digital, which was a online tool set for me, for one person, to do a hybrid release, meaning that it opened in one theater in New York and day and date, meaning on the same day it opened in New York, I opened it online in every market in the country, which made it the most widely distributed premiere of a film ever, right? Because the studios don't do this. Nobody's ever done it. And the challenge was convincing the entertainment media that opening virtually was still open. So, saying to the Seattle Times and the PI, this movie's opening. It's not opening in brick and mortar theater, but it is open. And it's a new.
Despite your attempt.
Despite, yeah, exactly. So long story short, if that's possible, the film was not only one of the best reviewed films, independent or otherwise, of the year 4 years ago, but it was also one of the most widely reviewed films, independent films of the year. So, the Seattle Times, the day it opened in New York and the day I said it was opening nationally, they reviewed it like they review any film that opens in a brick-and-mortar theater. And that was true in Seattle, it was true in LA, it was true in, almost every major market in the country. Washington, D.C., like the Washington Post was the only holdout, I think. So what I'm suggesting today is to take that very powerful tool set that allowed me to strategically open a film online and put those tools in the hands of the filmmaker and make it plug and play so that any independent filmmaker producer in the US or anywhere in the world can plug into this platform and strategically, theatrically, I call it the new theatrical release their film in a supportive environment with lots of guidance and help. So that's.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
But at 4 years ago when you released that, it was an anomaly to do that, right? So you were able to get some attention from those on the journalistic side of things because it was an anomaly. If you were trying to do that today and competing against thousands of other filmmakers trying to do the same thing, how do you see that scaling? How would you see an independent filmmaker releasing their film in that way against hundreds of other films releasing that way with day and date, getting attention from the markets the way that you were able to because of that?
I don't want to give it away today. but I do have a plan for that, and it will be competitive, and yes, the cream will rise to the top naturally, but it's also going to be a platform for a launch of a film. It's not going to be a site for aggregating films. It's not going to be Netflix and Amazon and iTunes, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be a place that is like a movie theater. Here's where it opens. It plays for as long as the market can bear, and then it moves on to subsequent layers of distribution. So the really cool thing about what we're doing is that it doesn't replace anything.
What you're doing, Mark.
What we're doing, greatest not pitch I've ever heard.
Well, I'm not allowed to talk about it, so I'm not. But what we're doing is it replaces nothing. That's like a critical ingredient in what it is, right? It adds value to everything because there are no movie theaters to open in for 99 out of 100 films. So we're providing that same mechanism to do the best you can in launching your film so that you can create value for it in a long tail, long distribution.
Can I just interject one moment? It's true, for 99% of the films, there are no movie theaters for them to open in, and the sad reality of that is because they're closed, because people don't go to the movie theaters anymore. And so as a movie theater, it is crucially important that you actually come to the theater. Go to see movies in the theater. When they're there, will help keep independent movie theaters open, and will help, will grow this in tandem with, the internet, video killed the radio star, and the internet killed the movie theater. It is happening, it's happening, but we can stave it off for a little bit if we all just keep going to the movies. Just as an independent.
It certainly remains important, but I also strongly believe that enough movie theaters aren't closing and probably will never close, and that there's a lot that's available to you if you just look for it and you talk to other filmmakers who've accessed it, and you begin to discover how to get into those channels. One example that comes to mind is there's a film that we played theatrically, and we might be the only venue in the country that did this, but it was called Empty Quarter, and the filmmaker is an experimental filmmaker from Portland who made this film about the southeastern part of Oregon, which is apparently one of the least populated parts of the United States, and it's this documentary, and it's super experimental in that every interview part of the film that they conducted, they went to a black screen, so they privileged the sound over the image. As the way that they talked about it, but this filmmaker, by simply asking me enough questions and talking to a number of other filmmakers who've also gone kind of through a circuit, ended up screening in 40 cities in North America, and it's pretty much lived off of that for the last 12 months. So I think that one of the things that's important is to realize that filmmaking doesn't stop at the end of your edit when you're finished with the film, and that In fact, probably more and more in the future, you're going to have to be heavily involved in a lot of the rest of the process of getting that work out into the world. But that it's somewhat daunting in that you have to put time and effort into it, but that it's not so daunting in that it's impossible. It's totally possible.
I'm gonna take a question from the audience.
This is similar to what you said, but maybe we could expand on it. A few years ago, I read John Reese's book, Think Outside the Box Office, and he talked about getting on the horn and talking to, the Northwest Film Forum in different cities or different art house or colleges, and just like totally doing it and tying that to your merchandising and everything. And I think, even like what he was saying, that even if you can just do LA and New York, but that this person got to 40 cities, that's still something that you can pull off. I don't know if I could, but that a person could, and I'm getting insights into that.
Well, I definitely think you could pull it off, and in many ways, like maybe the model to look at is the music industry, where a band goes on tour. And when I talk to this filmmaker, it's sort of like he goes on the road with the film and he books a tour of the film, and he does show up at a college, and it's part of the way that he makes his living is he'll teach a class at that school, and he'll connect with with a specific department that seems like it's appropriate, whether it's the film department, anthropology department, whatever happens to connect with the work that he made. But that the model that he's working off of, and this is like actually in the experimental film world, very much a part of what the model is looking at it like you're a band. Like you're going to be on the road, you're going to bring your DVDs, you're going to bring your t-shirts, you're going to bring all the merchandise that you have, and you're going to sell that stuff when you show up in the venue. And maybe only 20 people come, but if only 20 people come, 5 of those people are going to buy your DVD, and you're going to make a little bit more money, and you're going to teach a class or whatever. But that's the...
I found it hard to believe that actually it works. I mean, I know that actually we mean right, and you guys do a great job picking really films that are difficult to kind of show and you give them a venue. But I mean, many films right now, I mean, play for less than a week. So for less than a week, it's very hard to kind of get an audience, kind of grow for a film. It's kind of like number one. Number two, I mean, I've never really bought a like a t-shirt for the film. I mean, it's really, I mean, unlike the music industry, we don't have that kind of like, and we don't have that venues.
We could reimagine it, and there are a lot of filmmakers who are reimagining that and are creating like merchandising. In fact, I'm sure if you're in the transmedia conversation right now, a lot of what they're talking about is different ways to merchandise your film. I mean, that's really what the transmedia notion is.
And by the way, as I said, what we're doing is not replacing anything, including theatrical, brick and mortar theatrical. If you as a producer or a filmmaker want to or have the means to be in theaters, and a lot of filmmakers unfortunately today need to buy their way in four-wall theater, rent the theater. But we'll also help with that. So, theatrical is not going to go away. Brick and mortar theatrical is not going to go away completely. But I do disagree with you that I do think movie theaters are going away generally. And here's why.
I think we're at the end of the movie theaters.
You're not going away. You're not going. No, look, really. The specialty theaters won't go away. But what's going to go away are the cineplexes and the AMC theaters, most of them, and the
how many of you have made a
major
film
chains?
in
But
this
here's
room that is going to play at the AMC theater?
the reason they're going to go.
What was the question?
How many of you in this room are going to have made a film that's going to play at AMC, or that you thought was going to play?
Well, an ad that you want to play at the
Right, exactly. How many of you?
Because I would say yes, absolutely. I would love to make, personally, I would love to make a movie that is an incredible piece of storytelling and plays in every freaking theater in the country. If I worked at Pixar, those are the movies I'd make.
Doesn't SIF
Great stories,
place?
great commercials, great
We
commercials.
do, well, we use it as a venue.
Yeah. Why don't we go work at Pixar?
And AMC has a.
Well, that's right. I mean, it has to start with Pixar.
AMC has a specialty division that's, that specifically goes out and tries to find independent films to play in cities around the country. But the reason that those theaters are going to go away is because of disintermediation, meaning the studios, the people who are going to lose in this equation are not the content creators. are not you and not the studios. What's going to go away are the gatekeepers, and the gatekeepers are the theaters. The theaters take a huge portion of the proceeds. They keep all of the concession money, and they control when and where a film opens. And the theaters, the studios rather, are going to chip away and chip away and chip away at that to the degree that eventually it's all going to collapse. And the losers will be the theaters, and there'll be other places to go and other ways to watch movies that are going to be way better than going to even the biggest screen at the AMC Pacific or some other multiplex theater. The picture's going to be better, the sound's going to be better, but you won't be in that little box with spitballs on the screen and people kicking your seat and your shoes sticking to the floor.
On the other hand, you have like people, chatting with you online, and I mean, it's a different kind of distraction. I mean, the films that, were made for the big theater, which need kind of a slow burn, darkened room, nobody talking, you're gonna suffer when you have online distribution. That's another thing. The medium, the distribution also can.
Okay, question?
I was just wondering if you could talk about short film distribution, and is there a model for that?
I love short film distribution, but I'll let the panel go first, and I'll jump in.
Well, one model that I've actually seen is similar to this notion that you go out on the road, and again, I'll use a member of Northwest Film Forum as an example. There's this woman, Tess Martin. Actually, she has some films that people have cited. She's an animator, but she put together a collection of films from other animators in the Pacific Northwest and created a little package. And she took that on the road on her own and called up a bunch of theaters. I mean, short films are actually really hard I think theaters want to play them, but it's hard for them to figure out how to play them. And if you call and you say, hey, I'll be in your town next week and I have a package of shorts that you could end up screening that package of shorts. It requires you, networking with your other short filmmakers and to get them to.
So are they paying her? Is she
Yeah,
traveling? Okay.
Again, it's the same thing. She and I met, we talked about kind of what we typically charge for a screening, and it's not like you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you could probably come away from a tour with like $10,000 to $20,000 after a few months of being on the road with that work, and you could do that with some ease as long as you're able to know who to call in the first place.
Not with a single short film though.
Yeah, not on your own. You would have to
It
package
has to be a package, and so at that point it becomes a film.
Yeah, it becomes a program is what it is.
Yeah,
so it's just like, how can you fill the theater for the evening? At least in terms of theatrical. I mean, maybe these guys could talk about it.
And you've had to pay your way
Yeah.
to all of those markets and spent the $10,000 or $12,000 that you can make. And not to say that's not a good
Not
thing.
necessarily.
So my question is that net or is that, so you're basically flat?
I don't know that you're going to end up flat. And again, I think it's important that you go on the road with, your own DVD that you're selling, like all these merchandise you're selling.
Well, what if I want to start working on my next one? I mean, I don't
Well,
get time to
The two reasons.
Actually, there's another guy in the room who might have a lot to share. I'm just going to point him out because he might want to speak up periodically. His name is Nandan. He's in the festival, but he's also trying to pioneer a new model of distributing work, which is like really low access in terms of how you would get the film screened elsewhere, and it wouldn't require you going on the road. But I don't know if you want to.
Just for me, I guess, yeah, you did put me on the spot. Yeah, well, what I'm working on is essentially a model that's trying to encourage, I guess my thoughts is that the theater, so I mentioned that the AMCs and stuff are dying because they can't profit anymore. It's kind of it takes a lot to run a theater, especially in a large model. And you're essentially, if you're booking a film for a week, you're trying to draw an audience to a single film, try to market a single film and try to create a buzz for a single film. And to me, there's communities that already exist in the world, whether it's a group of friends in one neighborhood in Seattle, or a group of friends somewhere around a bar, or a cafe, an art space. And so what we're basically creating is an online marketplace where people can post their films and connect with places that can show their films. Maybe it's a place that has a projector and a screen in their backyard. Maybe it's a cafe that has a projector and they're trying to show the films, but they can book the film, they could possibly download it, they can get a Blu-ray, they can get a DVD, whatever it is, and they can show the film to the people, and they can split the profits with you directly. I'm basically trying to say, well, what is this concept of a theatrical ask or a social viewing experience, and creating a social viewing experience, but bringing that curation and the energy to the curators and the kind of local tastemakers in the community already. So it's not necessarily like you take your film on the road and you create a buzz where you go. It's connecting with people who know people and have a buzz in their own kind of community and in their own aesthetic. So there's going to be different venues. Rather than one venue that plays films in a town, if you think about it, there's a lot of different venues that have different tastes for different sorts of arts and different sorts of communities that are going to attract different kinds of films, because films are varied.
But the reality, I
Well,
was going to say,
go ahead.
the reality is that you're not going to make a living making short films.
Yeah,
But there are two really good reasons to make short films. One is as a calling card. So if you have an interest in making feature films or even TV content, full-length TV content, then that's a good reason to make a short. The other good reason to make a short is if it is an introduction to the feature that you want to make. So you shoot a scene, or you shoot, a really good example is possibly my favorite independent film ever, Stranger Than Paradise, was a short at first, and it was expanded into a feature-length film. So those two things can be really, really important, and be very valuable.
So you said This Other Wild was a short film. Marcy, part of Marcy Bay Marlene was a short film.
So I want to address the short film thing, and then I've got a couple questions right back here. In terms of, we're talking about a lot of things that are coming, and we're talking about a lot of things that are close to being here. I think it's interesting, like literally, if you have a film right now, what are you going to do with that short film right now? I personally, the short films that I've made, and that I have in the process right now, I'm extremely aggressive. I don't think we're making a living off it, but I want to exploit that short film for all it's worth. That's just the way I think of it. Part of that is because I want everyone that contributed to the short film to get all their worth out of all that effort they put into it. The first thing I do, for example, is I make sure I'm in the Palm Springs Shorts Fest. And the reason for that is it's one of the very few markets for short films. So
Back up
yeah.
to not, I make sure I'm in, I make sure I submit.
Yes, well, you know what, but actually,
Making sure you're in is great, but
I
submit,
make
period,
it-
end of sentence, submit.
that because the reason is, I think we're in
Are you saying
agreement.
you can't be bought?
No.
That's not saying no.
I say in, because here's what, the reality is, I don't care if I get into the festival of Palm Springs. Every film that is submitted is going to be part of the film market
Yes.
at Palm Springs. At the film market, they aggressively bring in distributors that do want short film content. Shorts TV from Europe, We Made from Canada, everybody is there, and they've got a catalog, and they're like, I'm looking for high school comedies, I'm looking for horror films, and they're all shorts. And they're going to look through those catalogs and find those films that were submitted, even if they don't go to the festival, they want the market, okay? So I didn't know that even existed, even though those are all a bunch of old SIP people down there, Kathleen and Daryl and everybody. I got a deal on, My Parents Became Cool, a film that I work with Film Forum to make here, out of that festival, not knowing the market even existed. And that deal was from Tribeca's new film initiative when they were doing distribution. So a woman named Sharon Vidal, who's the programmer for shorts at Tribeca, was at the market. She finds a teenage comedy, because that's what they want, comedies for their program. I get a call from a festival I got rejected from, and the film got picked up by Tribeca. The strategy, so that's just if I was a short filmmaker and I did a solid film, that would be the one $50 fee I would spend no matter what. Like, you would be crazy not to do that, unless you're just trying to hide it.
I'm sort of knowing what those festivals are, because it's not like Palm Springs might be the West, but there's a lot of them.
Yeah, there's great other markets. I'm just saying, here we are, it's easy to get to, great place to go. The second thing is there are today, not the future, but there are today tons of digital distribution opportunities that work very well for short films if you're going to promote and get behind them. Almost all of those will be non-exclusive. So my strategy is I want to be everywhere. And then if I get traction somewhere, I'll start pumping all the attention off my Facebook page or whatever I'm doing to the place where they're actually selling. If it's iTunes, if it's IndieFlix, if it's whatever. And then some of those distributors are starting to aggregate into longer formats. IndieFlix does a film festival in a box. Parents got picked up for a feature-length anthology. So it's all of a sudden, they do become more interesting. So I would add, there's a third. There's 2 reasons. I actually think there's more than the 2 reasons, although those are the 2 solid reasons that have been a long time. I think there's things you can do for sure. I think there's lots of opportunity. Are you going to make 50 grand on it? No way. Not going to happen.
And there are things you can do, obviously, with your feature. I mean, today.
Oh, yeah.
Even though it's not the greatest moment in time to be an independent filmmaker and get your film seen, there are plenty of outlets for distribution if you can sort of get onto them. If you can blog your way onto Netflix or pay your way onto Netflix and iTunes, and there are some TV outlets still, and there are ways for you to get the film out. And right now, as Steve just said, as many as you can. You know, like, it makes no sense to be exclusive anywhere. Try to get on everything possible, including DVD. And,
Okay, there was a question I saw behind you, sir. Is that question still, I want to be up?
You guys started touching on it. It was going to be, I would hope we could talk a little more about the digital distribution strategies and the best places to go. You already mentioned, a question I had was exclusive, non-exclusive. You already answered that one. But in general, I was hoping we could talk about that type of thing.
Okay, let's do that, because I think that's one of the top items we were checking outside was, you know, what avenues are available. And obviously digital is important, and you have a great idea that we don't know anything about yet. So we're going to skip right past that. Can we, as a panel, and let's be concrete if we can. I mean, for example, we have a couple actual people just either have been or are distributing films. So someone comes to you and they've made a film. You know, they're looking for your advice. They're hiring you as a consultant. They say, I'll pay you $500 an hour. Tell me what to do. I've made a film. I spent $200,000 on it. It's a drama. It's awesome. I have no names. I want to distribute it online. What do I do? John, what advice are you going to give?
I mean, you know, you have the usual suspects, Netflix. You know, the thing is basically it doesn't start online. It has to start somewhere else. And because if you start online, you're really going downhill very fast. You know. It has to start with the festivals and promotion, and if you have theatrical, everybody's asking, what have you done? Where's the film? How much have you invested in the brand? If you haven't done any much, this film is almost worthless, because it will cost more money to publicize it than what the film will generate online.
Before we run that by the panel, do you all agree that the thing to do, kind of ramping back for the film I just described,
At this
would be
point,
the festival
at
circuit?
this point. I mean, we
Right, no, today, that's right. I think today is a very,
At some
let's
point,
say
at
today,
some
not the
point-
future. Today, what do we think about the festival circuit as a start?
Look, I think you have to back up even further than the
Okay.
festival circuit. No, seriously, traditionally, what you want to do is make sure nobody sees your movie. Nobody sees your movie. Nobody at the festival sees your movie until you have an opportunity to manufacture enough buzz to get distributors interested in seeing your film. So there are two things that you can do, 2 avenues you can take. One is, before you go to the festival circuit, is try to get distributors to see your film, never one at a time. You don't give your movie to Harvey Weinstein, you know, first, before anybody else sees it. You try to do it in a inviting everybody in town. So you do a New York screening and you do an LA screening. You get the New York distributors, get their acquisition people, and you got to do a little research, find out who they are, find out, you know, how to get in touch with them, and, you know, you have to make some effort. But you try to get the New York distributors to come to the New York screening, and the LA, or, you know, some of them are both coasts. But you get the acquisitions people in New York, you get the acquisitions people in LA. Hopefully you even do it simultaneously, so there's no, you know, somebody sees it in New York and tells somebody in LA something, you know, that could be negative. You do them both at the same time. That's one way to go, and you've got to be really, really confident that you've got the goods. Because if you do that, and you don't have the goods, you're vulnerable, and no festival on the planet is going to save you from that. The other way to go is the traditional festival route, meaning you try to get into Sundance. And if you do get into Sundance, nobody sees it until the Sundance premiere. And if the distributors haven't seen it yet, they'll all be there. So they all see it under the best possible circumstances at a big
You
film
have
festival.
to try your best at that festival also to get all those people to show up to that screening.
Absolutely.
That's why you hire a publicist.
Yes. Hiring a publicist is
A sales
money.
agent, any of these things.
I-
And if
I
you got
think-
into Sundance, you're
I
gonna
want the
get.
tickets for distributors to see my movie at Sundance.
Yes, absolutely. You do everything you
And for
can.
critics too.
do everything you can to get those people there. Now, if that fails, then you start to evaluate the festival, the rest of your festival plan. And there are very few meaningful festivals in the United States. CIF is one of them. And they used to be more significant. Unfortunately, that's gone away a little bit, although maybe that's going to change if CIF has anything to say about it. But there, you used to be able to premiere a film at CIF or premiere a film at the San Francisco Film Festival, and distributors would go there to try to find, gems. That doesn't really happen anymore.
Well, that's sort of true. I mean, my experience, at least talking to a lot of filmmakers locally, is that there are these kind of smaller festivals that are out there, and there are people who are going to them, and it's sort of knowing what that festival offers, who they're bringing to that festival, whether or not, they are bringing any distributors on their own. And in a smaller environment, in a small festival environment, if they're bringing the right people to that festival, your film actually has a much greater chance of being seen than at any big film festival like Sundance, even CIF. And a lot of filmmakers, even locally, that I'm aware of, have had their films acquired because they played at something like the Oxford Film Festival in Oxford, Mississippi. Yeah. Or like Sioux Falls, or, I mean, there's and it's just, these are not like tier A, what would typically be called like tier 1 festivals, but they are smaller festivals that have a real niche interest from the industry. And figuring that out is important, I think, for you in making your decision about where your work is going to get screened. If you don't get into one of these bigger festivals, I mean, clearly getting into the bigger festivals is your best chance of selling the film for the most amount of money.
Sir, right here.
My name is Randy Brinson. I'm with KCTS, the local PBS station, and I have a question for the panel and for the room, which is what can a local public television station do that we're not thinking of yet that could be useful as a distribution plan for films?
I think PBS is sort of that tertiary stop. You do festivals and then go to the theaters, or you're lucky enough to really have the right film and a bidding war happens in New York at your acquisition screening, and then you have a distributor, and then you go to the theater, and it just sort of, it works its way down. And I think that what you're doing with Rural Northwest in non-exclusivity is just providing an additional platform, an additional way for content to be seen. It's the internet. People are still watching PBS. It's on TV. It's the History Channel, or people who on TV. Comcast is has a lot of like short film channels and stuff like that. There are a lot of cable and television content acquisition, and I think that KCTS is a really important stop for the film.
I think these days KCTS can actually launch a film. Getting a film on television, I mean,
You mean within sort of a limited market, just
No.
create some buzz?
Yeah, absolutely. As a premiere, if films premiere on television anywhere, if films get on television anywhere, if you're talking about independent films, the crappiest cable channel that nobody watches, if a film is on that cable channel, it's going to be seen by more people than probably it would have been seen theatrically. If a film were released sort of nationally in theaters. So TV is still, even in the face of the internet, still a really, really powerful medium. And I think one thing you might want to consider locally here is to break out of the Northwest, and and be either a community of the world, or at least a community of the U.S., and say, we understand that there's a problem. There are all of these films, hundreds, thousands of films that are not being seen, and some of them are really, really good. And if you make it known to the world that you are going to premiere the best of these films on KCTS, I think you can have a really important program going on.
It's kind of, I mean, in a way, it's a similar model to what we do with the distribution of the film format, which is, you know, you have a certain amount of power, and once you access that, a lot of people are going to start contacting you, and I think what's important for you as to remain kind of a curator in that, to make sure that you're weeding out things that you don't think are appropriate for what you're up to. Because there's going to be tons of people who want to access that, and everybody's going to be knocking at the door. And to keep the brand identity of what you're up to is really important.
Can I just say one more?
Yeah, sure, John, go ahead.
You know, in the morning I talked to somebody about the whole idea model of doing something kind of local, organic, fresh, you know. And what I meant by it is basically make low-budget films that are relevant to a certain region. Let's say Seattle or Washington State. I would love to see a genuinely Seattle film, by which, for example, we acknowledge that Seattle has rain, you know, that there is something kind of different and unique about the city, and it comes from the heart, and that's made by local people. And the distribution strategy would then be, so you raise enough money, so the film is basically paid for before it's made, you know, it's we're talking about like $50,000. And then afterwards, you pursue regional distribution, by which coordinate with CIF, KCTS, local, local film forum, and do a concerted effort to kind of do either four-wall or whatever, and make a buzz for the film in Seattle. And I think if you make a film for $50,000, you can get most of the money back in Seattle if you actually do a good job of putting a lot of buzz in a small area. And KCTS can really play a lot of big part of that. Not only in terms of showing, but also in promotion. So let's say if you coordinate with them, basically, KCTS can what would help is make a profile of the film that's shown in theaters, and in the promise that it'll be shown at KCTS later on. So we become part of the chain.
Absolutely.
And promotion. But basically, if we think that way, I mean, if it only plays like in 3 or 4, theaters, we'll get its money back, it'll get a buzz. If it's worthwhile, it'll move on. But we'll start small.
Can we, just Old Goats. Did you guys see that somewhere? SIF? That was the highest grossing independent film for one weekend this summer. Was a film made on Bainbridge Island, starring 3 old guys, just talking about themselves. That Taylor was just like, I don't know, I just kind of made it. It seemed like a really, no one expected anything. They did a great marketing plan. We planned at SIF Cinema to play it for 1 week, and they packed the theaters. And it outgrossed Beasts of the Southern Wild. You know, it was the right time, it was the right success story, but mostly the producers and David Skinner, who was distributing it, they did so much work. They got out there, they had, signs in people's yards, they brought the right kind of people in, they bussed in the senior citizens from every senior citizen complex in Queen Anne, they bussed them all in. And we did great 2 p.m. matinees, man, I will tell you.
But actually, to answer, this brings up something that I might be able to answer your question about making your next work, which I think one of the most important things is for you to be working with a producer who's actually the person who's working on that part of the project for you, and not for you, the filmmaker, to be doing that. And for that person to be much more dedicated to the future of that project, and knowing that it's important for you to make the next film. So.
For my feature.
I also just want to say, as far as KCTS, as a promotional vehicle, John's absolutely right. That's the most important role you can play. And you can build programming around being a promotional partner that's as compelling as showing the film itself without actually showing the film, right? You can do all kinds of programming around the film that plays at Northwest Film Forum, that plays at CIV Cinema. And you get a ton of exposure from it. You help, the local creative community in ways that are kind of unimaginable.
Yeah, but also you build it on the brand. Once you build on the brand, then
Hang on, I'm going to take some questions. I got a question from yes, and then here in front. That's what we're going to, 1, 2, 3. Okay.
I just had a question, bringing it kind of back to now and what we can do now, like if you have a film now. I've heard a lot of you guys say stuff about digital distribution, but accessing it from what I know is pretty difficult. I mean, from what I know, Netflix is not really taking one-off content anymore. They're taking aggregated content, and trying to get into something like iTunes or Hulu, you usually need to get with someone like New Video or an aggregator that can help put your movie. So how do you do that? Like, if we're gonna go, so say I've done a film festival run and I've taken my film around to 10 cities in the US, and we've, had a little bit of buzz, but not, we don't have a distributor attached. Is there a way to get into that besides going to something like IndiePix?
Have you done all those things?
No, that's in my plan, that's in my distribution plan, but just kind of saying, like, in our next, so like, how do you access this digital market that everyone seems to be talking about, like, that seems so hard to penetrate without a distributor or without an aggregator? Is that possible, or?
It's almost impossible unless you're selling DVDs.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon will sell your DVDs for you.
Right, like Create Space or something like that, yeah.
Part of it is, did you make a movie anybody's going to care about? I hate to be that blunt, but most independent films suck. And
well, I've got a documentary on top of it,
well,
so there we go.
and you've got a better toehold with a documentary than you have with a narrative film, because a documentary, making a narrative feature film is the hardest thing, and making a narrative feature comedy. Well, no, I was going to say comedy's the hardest. Drama, you could just like throw a bunch of blood on everything. But with a documentary, you know that there's a constituency somewhere, because somebody's going to care about it, right? So there's a way to work that on a marketing basis, and there are outlets. So if you're making a documentary, you've got a big head start to any narrative film these days. It used to be the total opposite. Today, that's the case. But the main thing is make a good movie. If you make a really good, compelling movie, which is all about the writing, I said this in the last panel, nothing's more important than the writing, and not a lot of directors are, and make your movie. But the preponderance of great movies ever made, the director didn't write the movie. So I would say, first and foremost, sounds idiotic, make a good movie, and make a movie that people care about, not just you.
I think also knowing what your movie is and knowing where that market is, and sort of like there are a lot of different types of films out there, and it's not always, you might not be making a film that's like completely story oriented, but you might make something else. But there is a market for that kind of filmmaking, and knowing where that is, and knowing the various channels and what the right hierarchy of those channels are is incredibly important. So identifying that first, what have I made, and how do I get this to the audience that exists for this particular?
You're talking about works.
It's not just experimental. I mean, it could be. I mean, you don't have to make a documentary that has like some sort of special interest, right? I mean, there's a million types of documentaries out there. It's really crazy for me to think, oh, there's only documentary that has special interest. There's like zillions of ways to make a documentary. So
I've got 4 backed-up questions. I'm only going to add to that discussion. I guess I'm not sure I'm buying how hard it is to find a digital platform distributor. I get that we need the aggregators now, but if you just got lucky and got your movie on iTunes, then you're just lost in the sea of iTunes. You still have to be the total self-promoter, in my view.
Right, but I'd at least like to get on there so I could promote it.
You can get on there. There's dozens of places that you can get your film as a place that can fulfill either that digital download or that DVD space, and then you're a promoter.
Or you do it in reverse, you drive the buzz yourself.
Right. So I guess
there's a way that you could build the infrastructure to your own website so that you don't have to totally rely on iTunes or any of these other outlets. It's not like you have to go to that aggregator in order to make your film it's not necessary.
And it's not necessarily the best. I mean, it's to me it would be almost like a last resort. But there are, over the last 6 months, several new companies that one that I can remember is called, I think it's called Digi Distribution. But these are companies that will provide you the encoding and the platform and the e-commerce platform to be able to, sell the movie so you don't have to be on Netflix.
Yeah.
You can do it on your own. It's really hard, but at least you've got a platform now. It's available to those billions of people. Now it's totally up to you in terms of driving traffic to wherever it lives, and it's probably your website.
One other thing I just wanted to throw out there before you pass on to the question is just that I think you could also begin to identify where your film belongs. If you look at your film and you say, what is the closest relative to my film, and what has been the history of that film? So you find a comparative film somewhere out in the world. You're like, where did this film play? Where is it being distributed? What digital distribution does it have? You can really begin to identify, and was that successful? Call that filmmaker up, email that filmmaker, find out. People are really happy to share this kind of information with each other.
Question, Craig? So,
Well, this goes back to the Channel 9 stuff. One, I think it would be great to foster a kind of a local identity and some things that are generated here that are uniquely of this region, and support that, and maybe even generate it in-house if that's possible. I mean, at the 50,000 level, I think that's very doable. There are plenty of people who could do that in this room. To make something that is has an identity that's uniquely Northwest. And I mean, this is what, the most literate city. It's one of the most arts rich areas of the country. It's one of the weirdest places. So there is an identity that should be exploited.
There is definitely a half-hour weekly show that KCTS could do, just covering films that are being shot in Seattle or in the general area. Be on set, talk to the filmmakers, talk to the writers, talk to. That would be an hour. That would be a half-hour a week, easy.
Like a reality show.
Yeah.
Okay, or something for indie film.
I mean, I wouldn't call it a reality show.
Randy?
But
Go ahead.
There was another part to that. And so that was about the localism, I guess. And the other thing is, with somebody like Beth, I bet knows 10 other programmers of other film festivals, and right there you have access to just top-notch curation of films that are not getting distributed anywhere. I mean, you could talk to a dozen other programmers and tell me the top 5 films that played at your festival that just blew people away that will never be distributed. And
There's a series that Rick Stevenson curates called Official Best of Fest.
that's what I'm
broadcast that.
that's kind of my point.
Produced,
It's about
is that show still being
Yeah.
produced?
It's off our schedule.
And that is the key word, curation.
Yeah,
It's how you find the cream from the dreck.
There's an ocean of crap out
Online, in the theaters, anywhere. It's that stamp of approval. It's somebody, a festival, a distributor, a journalist, somebody saying, this is a good film.
How many of you are familiar with the official Best of Fest, that company? So 5, 6, 7. I shot that question there because we were talking about how exciting it would be to have this curated content of great movies. And I know Rick Stevenson, who is behind that company, Official Best of Fest, basically goes around, tries to find terrific independent films that have not found distribution. Won awards, award-winning, that's
short
the template. Shorts, well, he also does features, but I think your show was just the shorts.
The
Okay.
broadcast version was a half-hour set of shows.
Okay. So I wasn't sure though if that was still being programmed because I was curious how it did. Is it being canceled, so to speak?
Yeah. It drew a less than average audience for us, which doesn't mean it didn't reach an audience.
Right.
But it's just a different kind of program.
Okay. I've got made a couple promises. Ma'am, do you still have a question?
I think so. I was, Adam, you were talking about finding out where your market is, and as somebody who's really new to this, and you gave one example of finding a comparative film, but I'm wondering, how do you go about figuring that out from the beginning? I mean, where do you start trying to figure that out?
Well, I mean, I know a lot of filmmakers do kind of test screenings, and or you could do a screening And I think with those, it's also important to invite people you don't know to the screening, and they can help identify kind of what the film is through.
Never invite anyone you know,
And never invite your family,
ever.
ever.
Invite them to the premiere.
Because they will not tell you the things that you need to know about your film. Because they don't want
Guarantee
to.
it's a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. I get invited to a lot of test screenings of films locally, and I know all these people, and it's really hard to be honest.
To be honest,
I actually try really hard to be honest, but it's hard to, what's hard is for you, like, separate. It's hard to be honest, sure, let's be clear.
At this point, you know, in the process, you should be really aware of what the target audience is, who's going to watch it. I mean, if you got to that point, I mean, if you did your work correctly, distribution starts from day one. And really, it shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, you know, if you got the film made, you should really know who's going to be showing it, who's going to be interested in paying for it. Watching it is not an issue. A lot of people watch things, but are they going to pay for it? Are they going to actually subsidize, help you? So it's too late to kind of be thinking at this point. Hopefully you have that figured out. And the issue is, as we are progressing,
film changes in the process.
that's different. But in general, still, you know, you're making a documentary about a certain subject. You know exactly what where you heading.
You have to know why you're making it.
Yeah, you have to know why you're making. Then who's going to watch it?
I think you have to know what you ended up with, because I think that those two things often are really different, and that identifying what the film is that you have is something totally different from the point that you started at.
True, but possibly to some extent. But it's all about niche. Basically, we cannot be aiming at every. I mean, initially, we made films that appealed to general publics. I mean, like, you know, my mom and dad used to go to the movie theater. They used to dress up and go to the movie theater. I mean, every film was made, was part of the diet. Everybody saw it. Nowadays, film is not the dominant medium. Basically, we're going to niche audiences. The smaller audiences focus on the small and exploit the small and hope for the big. But at least if you have an audience that's passionate about it, that you know for sure you can access, you know, because then you can, let's say you made a documentary about a certain subject and, you know, about firefighters, and you can reach firefighters, then you can put it online and get firefighters to watch it, and then focus on that. That's much easier than saying, I'm going to make a film about, that's why romantic comedies are difficult, because if you don't have big budgets behind them, promotion-wise, then you're not going to be able to.
Also really important is to be conscious that you're making it for an audience. A lot of filmmakers don't do that. They make it for themselves, and they think it's perfect, and they think it's wonderful, and they think it's the best thing ever. And they never once, until they're sitting in a movie theater, in a movie theater, wondering what note came. Because you have to.
Well, it's also like if you make art for yourself, then you find the people who are like yourself in that niche. It's not totally impossible that there are people who have similar interests to you. But knowing that that's a much smaller audience, I think is really important. And it's not like, oh, you shouldn't make a film for yourself, or you shouldn't make a film for a smaller audience. Like, if that's what you want to make, then go and do it, you know? But know that that's what it is, and figure out who those people are.
And the consensus in the production class this morning, if you're going to do that, don't go out and raise $500,000.
Right, totally, don't do
film
that.
for yourself.
Right.
That's where you need to have the knowledge of who is going to see the film. I made a promise to you, and then I think I'm over here. Yeah.
So about a week ago, Vimeo launched essentially like a tip jar feature where it's, hey, if you like my work, I'm a starving artist, donate something or don't, whatever. Do you think that could ever evolve into a viable option, or do you think it's kind of a gimmick right now?
I'm unfamiliar with
Yeah,
that.
I think everything right now is a stopgap. I mean, it's cute,
Yeah.
but and it's a press release, but it's not gonna sustain as a film. Yeah.
See, unfortunately, what happened, the transition that is happening at the same time where we have economic collapse. So I think if it was a normal time, things would have been completely different. I think a lot of people would have wanted to help out. But these times, people don't have money. And if they're gonna get it for free, they'll get it for free. I'm on Reddit. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Reddit. It's kind of an online community by which people vote on stuff, and they have a section for documentaries. And there's 50,000 people on that page. And every time somebody posts a trailer for an upcoming movie, people are like upset. They want to watch the whole thing. They want to link to the actual thing on YouTube to watch it for free right now. And I remember like posting something saying, how do you expect these films to be made if you're not going to be paying for them? The new generation basically is not really kind of aware, of the production that we how much it costs and stuff, and they want everything instantly, and they don't have an issue with not paying for films. I don't want to kind of put it all in the new generation, because there's different things going on. It's more complex than that. But what I'm saying is that if people are going to get it for free, they'll get it for free.
I think it's also, again, this is another place where we that way, then I think what you'll find is people are more generous. And even this is actually started to translate into like bricks and mortar spaces. Like I think it was like Quiznos or something has a like pay what you can space now, like in Chicago, where you come and you can like buy whatever food you want, and they were finding that people are more willing to spend more money to buy.
Which is different than the tip jar idea, because right away you're saying, throw in a nickel.
Right.
You're not saying, pay what you can.
That's essentially what it is. It's their phrasing, not mine.
Okay, I'm gonna go on to the next question. Yeah.
I think that YouTube has that feature too, actually, that you
Yeah.
can donate. I was gonna say, once you get a distributor, how do you manage the relationship with the distributor so your work is seen more? Like they ask you, where do you want your work seen? Is it, do you have my permission to distribute it here and here and here and here and here? And you're like, yes, yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
If you get a distributor, know that you have no say in anything.
Okay.
So they're going to do what they're going to do, and even if they say you're going to have say, you probably won't. The best thing you can do for yourself is have a really, really good lawyer. That's the number one thing, because if you should never talk to the distributor other than to listen to them tell you what a wonderful film you made. If they want to acquire the film, talk to my lawyer, and they'll make the best deal for you that they can. A lot of distributors now, and I'll talk about IFC in particular, because as it was written, I think somebody wrote this week or soon after the Toronto Film Festival that IFC is now coming and sweeping up all the films that didn't get acquired.
They've been doing that for like 5
And
years.
that's what acquisition by a distributor means these days more than not is that you're getting little to no money. And in fact, sometimes they're asking you to provide P&A.
And I think the A part of that is actually what's important. Is like what's most important once you sell your film, no matter who you sell it to, is for you to know where that film is playing and for you to do everything or create a team who's doing everything to make sure that people in that place know what's happening. Because it's not going to be a priority. I mean, it's somewhat of a priority for the distributor, but really they have like 10, 20, 30, 100, 2,000 maybe if you're IFC, other films that they're working on that year, So
unless there's a bidding war, unless it's a bidding war, and you're in the category which almost never happens.
So, but John, I want you to weigh in, and as the lawyer in the room, I'm going to affirm what he said.
I somewhat disagree with Mark, because I think this is kind of the old model. We no longer basically if you have the choice, give your film to one distributor anymore. It's kind of the old model. If they're paying you $100,000 or $500,000, maybe that's a kind of different scenario. But what I'm saying is ultimately, right now is you can farm out your film to somebody who has access to Netflix. They can do deals with digital distribution. You have deals with like the DVD release, theatrical. If you can segment as much as possible, the better off you're going to be. Because you have more control over this. Sometimes you don't have the option, but the trend right now with independent film makers, and if you can segment, and if you have a sales agent who can help you with segmentation, that probably is the best choice.
Yeah, and it's like selling to a number of territories. But one of the other things that's really trendy in like 2 years is that, I think this came as a result of so many small distributors going out of business and the people who are working there, like not having to work, is that they've become a booking agent. So a lot of small filmmakers that I know are contracting with a booking agent. They'll say, hey, I'll give you $25,000 and I need you, and your agreement is, they say, we'll book your film into 20 theaters, and they are able to do that. They have enough other relationships, and that's like a completely other part of theatrical distribution that's actually pretty vibrant right now, and all the people who I used to work with that say like think film now have a job doing that, where they're like, I'm my own company and I have all those same contacts. I just took my Rolodex and I get phone calls from them all the time. But those films they're really independently distributed because the filmmaker's paying that person.
But it's, right, so it's not just a matter of that they're booking the film, you're paying them to book it, plus you're paying for any advertising that happens for
So that's
any promotion that happens.
Almost smart, is that smarter to do that than?
Well,
to
they
do-
have-
Again, it depends on what your
relationships
film
you
is
know.
and for you to figure out like,
It's case by case study.
yeah, I mean, it's so hard
If
to.
the film is easy to access audiences and willing to pay for it, and if you know for sure you can have film theaters, then it's probably better for you to kind of do it with a booking agent or something like that.
It's not even a four-wall. I mean, a
Well,
four-wall is
booking
like,
agent.
hey, you could do a four-wall on your own. You can go to every theater in the country
Could
and
rent
say,
a
I'm
theater.
gonna rent your theater, and I'm gonna charge my own admission, and they'll rent it to you for a week, for a night. We'll do it here. I mean, if you guys have a movie and you wanna rent our theater, part of the deal here is
And you keep
totally
some
up
of
to
the
them.
profit, basically.
So I would like to weigh in just on the point of, let's say you are lucky enough, because I think this is already liking above, you already had the pack, you've gone to the festival circuit, you've had some success, you've built some buzz for whatever reason. Now you're getting contacted by distributors, not studio level, but you're getting contacted by a bunch of distributors who say, I want to do a deal. If you have been lucky enough that you haven't had to pay for a lawyer up to this point on your project, as you maybe as a low budget filmmaker, you didn't have a budget, and you didn't do it, and you got by, and no one sued you, and no one's saying you can't distribute your film,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
You've gotten that far. This would be a spot, perhaps above all, that you have got to scrape the dough and get somebody who knows, not just contracts, first year law student can tell you that, but what the industry terms really are going to be. What is going on in the industry on that day? What can you negotiate, not negotiate? Because Mark is right. It's the one time from that point forward that you have a say. Because when you sign that distribution deal, they will acquire all the rights through the universe, into perpetuity, forever and ever, amen. I mean, somewhere you'll see all of those words in this agreement. And what that means is it's gone, and you have no more say. And there's almost no, even the newer models, the more progressives, are still going to take that level of rights they're just going to do it. And their rationale will be, you can't handcuff us, you got to let us go. We can't have handcuffs, we got to do whatever, we got to evolve. And so it's that's the moment. That's the moment that you get to have your final say with your baby, this thing you love.
And also, when you get to that point, you should start talking to all the other people who've had their film distributed through that person.
Great idea.
Yeah, experience.
Absolutely.
And it's so easy to get that info because you just go on the website, what are the films, you can do it. You can do that due diligence in a week easily. Sir?
It seems like the one thing that, of all the distribution options, assuming that the film is your baby, the key component is marketing and promotions.
Yes.
Could you speak to some strategies there or ideas?
Can we answer that question? Can we hear the festival perspective, like really nailing it at a festival? Like marketing promotion at that perspective, and then let's move through the other platforms. Okay?
Sure. Independent films that don't have publicists behind them, that are just like, you have gotten into a festival. Now, what does that mean for you? That means you go to that festival. That means you go days in advance to that festival. And you get out there and you put up posters, you hand out postcards, you meet people, you contact the press, you are Facebooking and tweeting and getting followers and then following them and moving through. You have to do it because for every festival, there are, Sundance, right? You get into Sundance, it's amazing, but they have 12 publicists for 200 films. Now, is your film going to get lost if you don't have a star, if you don't have any buzz, if you are like this, this really indie world premiere that's somebody really loved and you got in? But if you don't do any work around that and you expect the festival to do that, your film is going to get completely lost. And it's going to be one of these terrible, tragedies that it's this amazing film that no one ever saw. films that have done really well despite themselves at CIF are the ones that came to the festival and they went to all the coffee houses and they met people at the coffee houses. And then they put up a poster and people were like, oh wait, I met that guy, I should go see his film, he was really nice. They handed out one of them, was it One Fine Day? No, that wasn't quite right, but it's something like that. Paul Tedesco's film from about 6 or 7 years ago. He and his producer came and they handed out crystals. And just, to people in coffee houses and to people, they went out to bars and they handed out crystals. And people started wearing crystals and they're like, well, what was that crystal? And they're like, I met this guy, he made film and he gave me these crystals, kind of cool. I'm like, oh, what film? Boom, boom. Word of mouth, the best way to get somebody to go see something that you've made or go do something you want them to do is to meet you, is to meet someone that has met you, meet someone that knows you, get yourself a little team of people that are going to go out and tell people that this is a great thing to do. Because there's so much stuff going on all of the time, and if you don't know anything about something, you're not going to choose to do it.
But Beth, with all due respect,
Yeah.
because, festivals, okay, so basically they're doing all the work and getting no money, and there's no guarantee of any distributor picking up the job.
Exactly.
So basically, I love it. I'm just saying, but what's the point? What's the point of doing all this work if they're not going to make any money? And if the film gets picked in the in CL, best CL, you're going to have another screening for free. So why would if
that's just if you agree to.
Yeah.
So, but that's not only CIF. I mean, all the festivals are the same.
all the
But that, to me, the whole point of the festival is to have promotion for the film. And if we have to slave to kind of get the audience into the theater, then why not forward it and make it the money?
I'm not saying that festivals are
This
not
is why smaller film festivals I think are an interesting idea for you as a filmmaker, which is CIF has close to 400 films in it. It's really hard for them to get the attention of the press locally for any of those 400 films, and the press can only cover so many, and a small film festival that has 20 films or 10, the press in that place, or the press who's covering that festival, if they're getting coverage, which is something that you should check into, you're more likely that, the odds are much better that your film is going to get the kind of attention that you want it to get.
And I'm not saying that the festivals aren't doing anything and aren't promoting films and aren't trying to get press for every single film. I'm just saying, as filmmakers, it behooves you to help them.
No, I do. As a distributor, I felt the same thing. I don't want to be hypocrite here. But
You're not going to hear that any different from anyone. So really, you're going to have to be.
But ultimately, the filmmaker basically is the one who's basically doing everything. And I just feel like the more we are progressing in terms of the more output that we have and less venues, the more we're asking filmmakers to do the work, to do stuff, for free.
Sadly, there's so much content out there now that you have to be doing it. As I said, you have to have a team of people who you've set up in advance.
I have this picture. I'm done with the festivals. I've figured out how to get it online. And maybe I've broken through and it's on iTunes, maybe it's on PDFlix, maybe it's on a number of places. But basically, it's going to sit there and lay an egg, right? Unless I do something to promote it. We have some tips to speak directly to promotions and marketing. Once I've got that.
It's really still everything that said. But I will say that earlier I said you want to be everywhere, you want to be on every platform. Let me amend that to say that the most important platforms are transactional. Because even if you get on Netflix, or even if you get on Snag Films, if you're on a platform that is subscription-based and is going to pay you based on CPM, the amount of advertising dollars that they get, then that means that 1,000 people need to see your film on that platform before you get a piece of the $10 or $20 that the advertiser is paying. So you can, even if you get on a popular platform, unless many thousands of people are going to see your movie, you're not going to get anything out of it financially.
I'm actually curious, Cassidy worked for a little while for Film Movement, which is an interesting model that they take 12 featured in 12 Shorts, is that right? And they have a DVD distribution, and it's all member based. So can you talk a little bit to that point that Mark?
Well, they offered more of an MG
Okay.
upfront, which is less and less heard of nowadays. And the MG wasn't huge, but it was enough to get your film seen, and then they distributed, multiple platforms in different places. But it wasn't necessarily transactional based or anything like that. It was more, we're gonna give you money up front. If we make money after we've paid all our costs, then you can get.
Rare that they
It is, and it's very rare to get any money after that. So it is like, on one hand, a lot of deals are done now that are just after. We'll give you 50% or whatever after, and it's like, haha, see you later, because the chances that you're gonna get that money back after they've recouped their costs of marketing and publicity and cutting prints and blah, 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 is pretty rare. So the chance, to get an MG up front was actually kind of a better option than a lot of things. But to see it on the, transactionally based, but they're an aggregator too. So they would sell, we would sell 12 films to Netflix, and maybe 9 of them went right online, and only 3 of them actually had DVD services with Netflix. Or same with Amazon and CreateSpace and stuff like that. So there's more about aggregating content and just paying them up front, and then, that's all you see.
Are you at liberty to share, like, if you take 12 films a year, what the median was as far as a return to the filmmaker for being involved in that company?
I don't know if I'd feel comfortable saying exact numbers,
I
but
work with them. I mean, basically, the MG was around in the 25,000 to 30,000, depending on that's the one I kind of, at least my transaction, and I never saw any money afterwards. So I mean, but that's very typical.
Absolutely.
But yeah. So the bottom line is basically everything we're saying here. I mean, like, there's nothing guaranteed. Nothing guaranteed, and the system is the old system is fading, and the new one is and the new one is basically promising more reach, but no money or little money at this point. And so the idea is to make the films that you want to make, because that's really what the bottom line.
And don't quit your day job.
Well, the other part of it is, and again, I brought this up before, but I don't think I went into too much detail, which is just there's so many different territories that can buy your film. And the thing about IFC is they buy worldwide rights. So it's like for $20,000 you sell your film for the next 20 years to one company, which is a stupid thing to do, really. Because you could sell your film to like 40 different territories for the same amount, which is a lot more money that you could end up getting. And of course you have to know how to get it. Again, there's like people who know those people who are making those purchases, but you should think about your film not just in terms of the United States or the United States and Canada or North America. You should think about it in terms of every single country that the world is.
Which gets us back to sales agents and lawyers. You
Well,
don't want to do any of that.
One of the beautiful things about this discussion, though, I think, is the magnitude of time and energy and thought that goes into what happens to your film after it's done. And I can tell you that my experience seeing clients and filmmakers and things coming to ask is literally, we were joking earlier that we'll see budgets and there's not even a line item for marketing. Not that it's zero, it's not even spelled out on the budget that I'm marketing and distributing my film. It's simply, I've got this film, here's a budget, and you realize that that's it, that's the end of it. And it's not because filmmaker doesn't want to raise the extra money. They haven't even thought about all of these issues, which are truly profound.
And you're more likely to raise the money these days if you're providing yourself and your investor up that line item.
Yeah, I would never be
I mean,
afraid.
even if you're making a budget for your Kickstarter campaign and you're like, I'm raising $25,000 for my film, it's important when you're making that budget to think, how much money do I want to spend on marketing? And then add that to your Kickstarter campaign. I mean, if that's the way you're funding your project, then just be thinking about it.
I work with a lot of angels in different fields, in addition to angel investors, in addition to film, and all of them, the last thing they want to have happen with your projects is for you to run out of money to get it across the finish line. It's the last thing they want. They hate it if you ask for more. So what they really, 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 really want is to see a budget that will get your project across the finish line, so that enough dollars are raised, so that when you say you're going to do these things, you can do them. So I mean, don't be afraid. You're not doing anyone a favor, including yourself and the investor community, by not addressing the cost of the things we are.
Well, it also shows that you've actually thought about what's
Sure.
gonna happen to your film. Like at the very outset, you wanna know what you want to have happen with that. If you wanna just make it and have it made, just have it made and as practice, that's one thing. If you wanna sell it to, you know, Weinstein's, it's an entirely different thing. A lot more unlikely than just having it made. But I mean, if that is, you have to define for yourself what you want that film to do in the world.
How many here are automatically going to give their film to Mark? I am at this point. I don't know what you're doing. And yeah, so yes, question.
Yeah, talking about the marketing and distribution line item in your budget, can you do a rule of thumb as a percentage of your overall budget, or how do you actually come up with that number?
No, I don't do a rule of thumb. I mean, to me, it's the same as doing your production. You should, if you don't know, you should talk to people who know what those things really cost, and it should fall out of, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna do 20 festivals. I know what 20 festivals admissions fees are. I know what travel expenses are. I know what I'm gonna spend for postcards, because I buy them at Shark Dots, and I know, I mean, it's a budget. You're just running a business.
And
So
make sure part of it is publicity.
yeah, right.
I mean,
Assume you're gonna
if
hire
you're like,
publicists.
hey, I'm gonna open my film in New York City, I need to take out an ad in the Village Voice. How much does that ad cost? What size ad do I want to take out? I mean, there's a lot of questions that, again, it's like figuring out what your strategy is, and then once you lay that strategy out, doing the research to figure out what the costs are.
It's not gonna be like in construction, where someone will say, well, the architect's fees are 15% of construction budget.
$100,000 for a narrative feature.
If you're
Just to
doing
throw,
like
just
a
to throw, to
like
throw a
a
number.
giant national,
100,000 for marketing.
That's not a giant national.
a small national.
That's a
What was
small
your
national.
overall budget then?
Pardon?
What was your overall budget for that?
It might have been $100,000.
It could have been 5,000. Whether you spent 5,000 to make your movie or $1 million to make your movie, it doesn't matter. It's going to cost the same to market.
Marketing is, marketing is not, when you're making the movie, when we're making the movie, we're like, oh, how can I spend less money? I mean, you want to be frugal when you're marketing, but no investor, nobody wants you to sort of save the money not hiring the publicist. You know, those are things you want to think about, whatever your strategy is, capture it and budget for it.
Again, like your fellow filmmakers are your best resource. They're gonna they're very willing to share information with you, figuring out again what that kind of similar.
I would agree with you up to a certain level, but I think you get up in the higher budget movies, and I think it becomes harder to share information.
I think if you're gonna end up in the higher budget films, one, you're gonna have a lawyer.
You have a lawyer.
Two, you're probably gonna have a distributor who's going to handle a lot of that, and they're gonna pay you a fee, and you're gonna be done with it. So, they're gonna be taking care of your advertising costs.
That's a really good question. I don't know that I agree. I think most filmmakers would gladly share. I mean, is there really a trade secret about the publicists I worked with? And I'd love to get, the real issue is will the publicist choose to work with you more than sharing who that publicist, you know what I mean? I think it's like in that area, getting the details of what you would need to know to put together the budget for marketing and distribution, I think people would share with you. I really do. Yes.
Well, I just wanted to comment on when Beth was talking, and Mark, and remember was talking about publicists. When you're spending money on marketing and publicity, having a publicist as a film critic who works Toronto and Sundance, if you don't have a publicist representing your film and that publicist is not someone that I know, the likelihood that I'm going to see your film, even if you're lucky enough to get it into Sundance or Toronto, is infinitesimal. I mean, it's like, 300 films at Toronto, and I saw 35 films. And of those 35 films that I saw, all but 5 were recommended to me by publicists that I know and trust. So if you want to get your film in front of the critics, who the acquisitions people are actually listening to, you have to have a publicist or your film is just going to get buried and be wasted getting a film into Toronto or Sundance.
Chances are, if you got it in Toronto or Sundance, there's going to be a publicist who's going to be calling, there's going to be dozens of publicists calling you up and say, hey, I want to represent your film with this guy. And again, it's like, talk to the other film, ask them who their clients have been, talk to the other filmmakers with you.
I will give you a list of publicists.
Well, one thing that I'm actually thinking of myself, I'm really surprised nobody's mentioned yet, is interview footage, B-roll footage, PPK footage that you can throw up on YouTube like a new one every week, whether or not you have distributor, whether or not the movie's finished yet, whether or not you even started making a movie. Never too early to start, planting those seeds, and that's free.
Or never too late. Like a good example, actually, tonight, there's a film here, in this small film festival, really tiny film festival. Drew Christie is a local animator, and for his screening at this film festival, he's made 7 kind of like congressional style ads of himself pitching you to go to his screening. And he put those up virally, and at the festival, we put them up on our website as well. So, I mean, it's never too early, and it's also never too late.
That may be the single most important thing to be doing all throughout the process.
I've been impressed in terms of people loading content nonstop. The people that have been successful and are on the 2nd or 3rd season of web series, and they're out raising money on Kickstarter, they're out raising money to finance those productions. They're brilliant at constantly pinging content. I mean, because they're producing it all the time, and they must be running cameras nonstop on every set because they've just got everybody getting interviewed. They're just really putting stuff up, and it works for their audience. But it's very different than I think 10 years ago we didn't think about. Everything's content, we just throw it out there. We just never had to do it. I had promised somebody who did you have one more?
Yeah, mine's more of a cynical question, sorry. So if you made one of the 98% of movies that suck, or just, I'm going to say good, not great enough though, when do you know that it's, and you haven't got your distribution, when do you know it's the right time to say, okay, this is good practice, I'm going to go make my next movie and learn from my mistakes sooner? Is there like a telltale sign, like right now you want to stop, like, or is there a...
You give it your best shot, and don't kill yourself over it, and don't bankrupt yourself with it, and you've gotten to that point by making it great. Move on to the next one.
I say like 12 months after you've started submitting your film, if nothing's happened to your film,
Yes.
make your next.
Between a year and 2 years.
But it's important to know.
If it's gotten to 2 years.
To learn. It's important to learn. I mean,
10 years stops. No more than 10 or 12.
But my point is, what did you learn from the experience? Also, is important. If you have a clue of what you learned, what you did wrong, so in order not to repeat the same mistake, or to learn from the experience, that's a good judgment, I think. Good judge.
And as a follow-up, is there a best place to post those good, not great films? Like,
Your website.
Yes.
Maybe not even your website.
Yeah.
Someone else's website that you don't like.
Wait for you to make it. Wait for your next film to come out, for it to be good, for people to want to screen it, and then say to those people, hey, by the way, I have this other film. Maybe you want to take a look at it. And then, like, the more films you have, the more success you have, the more likely that film that nobody ever saw is going to get shown.
And along those same lines, if you get successful making a film and you never got to make the one you really wanted to make, don't go back and make that one, because it probably is like the worst thing that anyone's ever seen, and that's why it didn't get made.
In terms of
maybe you didn't have the budget for it at that time, in which case go back and make that film.
I don't know if you all have this experience. I see this quite frequently where someone tells me they've reached this point, and then I'm picking their brain, so I'm going, where are you? And they say, well, I went to Sundance and Toronto and Cannes, I got turned down everywhere. And it's sort of like and then I'm like, and then? And that is the end. It's like, oh no, I'm not getting in anywhere. And I got turned down in Seattle, and that's the end of it. And then I ask about the film, and it's like, well, I made it's a low-budget sci-fi, futuristic, post-apocalyptic. All of a sudden I go, so why are you going to Sundance in Toronto and Cannes? It's just like totally, in my view, a big miss in terms of the whole strategy. And I'm like, don't stop. Is it a good movie? If it's a good movie, you should be at the Austin Fantastic Fest, and you should be at Comic-Con, Dragon Con.
Yeah, our answers were based on the work that you did in that year was real, was based on reality, was based on the movie you made, and not like your hopes and dreams for your filmmaking career.
The other truth is that at this point in the world, there's a film festival for every film.
Every second.
There's a film festival for every one of your films, and it's just finding what that is.
There is a shelf life though.
thing you can do in a festival is get it reviewed. So that way, if nobody came, if you didn't do your work, if you couldn't afford a publicist, or a smaller paper, doesn't matter, reviews. You know, in general, in a commercial world, reviews have never meant less, but, you know, for an independent film that's to make it in the world, reviews are still really, really important.
Yeah, crazy. I blogged about a film out of the Berlin Film Festival a few years ago, and the one quote they put on their front page was a quote from my blog, and it's just for the blog for the film forum. You know, it's not even. It was like Hot Split, because that's the name of the blog. That's the name of the blog. But yeah, I mean, I think he's right. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different levels of film festivals, and there is a film festival for every film out there. There's an ungodly number of film festivals around the world. Don't just look in the U.S. Around the world. And so if you get into Sundance, and yours was one of the 50 films that just kind of got lost in the shuffle, that doesn't mean you're done. That just means you got into Sundance and you got lost. So then you go, okay, well, where do I go now? What do I look at now? You know, what film festival? And apply to film festivals that are predisposed to like your film. If you have animated sci-fi porn, do not apply to the Heartland Film Festival. They're not
What's happening?
They're not going to like your film, but a Fantastic Fest is going to just like, oh yeah, animated sci-fi.
And there are also festivals that are award farms.
Yep.
Oh, you know, back when I was distributing movies, the Houston International Film Festival was like the award farm of all time. Every movie that was in there got an award of some kind. So
Every single film in Stiff
Yeah.
an award.
Canada.
Canada?
Canada
All of
International
Canada.
Film Festival.
Just kidding. I mean, and do look internationally, because there's a lot of film festivals that want U.S. content internationally.
Yeah, actually, this came up recently. There was an article in IndieWire about Locarno this year, which was all about how screening your American film in Locarno was better than screening your American film at Cannes, because the people at the festival are looking for American films, and there are so many fewer American films at Locarno than there would be at Cannes, and also that those films tend not to have like big Hollywood stars at Locarno, and so if you're the small filmmaker